Have made 2 arrests in the case.
The owner of the home, Charletta Moore, appeared in court this afternoon through a video conference. She is charged with felony negligent child abuse and some misdemeanor charges as well. Her brother, Anthony Moses, faces misdemeanor charges for failure to report crimes against a juvenile. The counts all surround the death of 5-year-old Tamani Oden and the 3 other children who were left in the Raleigh home in July of 2022.
WRL investigates Cullen Brown.
Hit that like button. Go ahead. Do it now before I reach out into that screen and twist your hand like Aunt Esther. Hit the like button. Thank you.
Destroy.
Well, it's mellow madness because you will ask yourself the question, what were they thinking about, the angry man, when they did what they did? And then you got to ask the men, what are they thinking about, the angry man, when they allow the behaviors of some of these modern women?
Yeah. That all too often, guys, we see it not only in the media, but also in our communities as it relates to not only destruction and the abuse of children, but how many of our babies are actually left unattended by horrible parents. Fatherlessness is at an all-time high, and could it be argued that because women are choosing men that are not worthy to protect them, protect their children, and bring financial sustainability, that many children are left at the hands of abuse and neglect? I'm not going to be before you guys too long on today, but I'm going to show you guys the importance of how protective factors play a role in helping children feel safe, not only mentally, but also physically, but also when kids are in homes and environments where they're protected. Not only do they excel in academics, but they also excel in all other areas of their life. But too many times we're beginning to see it that, as I said earlier, that too many kids are left unattended. And when children are left unattended, they can be more at risk for abuse. Let's explore this video and explore this clip real fast. And you guys tell me what you think about this incident of this 5-year-old baby that lost her life in the Tar Heel state, and what needs to happen to reduce such occurrences moving forward. So let's look at it, guys, real fast, and tell me what you think, because as a clinical therapist, we're beginning to see it all too soon. And protective factors are what help children feel safe. But babies can't feel safe with bad parents. So let's look at it. Hold tight.
Children were left alone in a home in Wake County. A 5-year-old girl wound up being beaten to death. Now, authorities have made 2 arrests in the case.
The owner of the home, Charletta Moore, appeared in court this afternoon through a video conference. She is charged with felony negligent child abuse and some misdemeanor charges as well. Her brother, Anthony Moses, faces misdemeanor charges for failure to report crimes against a juvenile. The counts all surround the death of 5-year-old.
And that's what happens, guys. That's the silence code many times that we have here in the black community, the code of silence, a code of silence to the point that many times it leaves children in a state of perplexity, and it leaves children in a precarious state. This man had a moral and also a social responsibility to protect his niece, but he didn't. Imagine if this baby would have had a father in the home that could have helped her overcome some of those struggles. And what happened, her little brother beat her to death, because when children don't have parents and when they feel like they're not getting attention, children will act out. As I told you guys before in the past, needs drive behaviors. And when children are not getting their needs met, they can act out. But all too often, this senseless violence is something that we see reoccurring over and over again in communities and families, and also in the nation. And this microcosm is just a great example of a greater macrocosm. We're going to finish looking at it, guys. Hold tight as we look at this reaction. Hold tight.
5-year-old Tamani Oden and the 3 other children who were left in the Raleigh home in July of 2022.
WRL investigates Cullen Browder joins us now in the studio with why this horrific case hasn't been reported until now. Cullen?
Well, Gerald and Deborah, because this appears to be a juvenile-on-juvenile crime, so it remained a secret in the justice system for months. Before those arrests, we spent weeks going through public records and family interviews to piece together this tragedy.
Tamani was a princess in all aspects. Beautiful, funny.
On this front porch, there is pain and anger over the brutal death of 5-year-old Taimani.
And guys, this is what happens all too often. You know, when these babies are killed, or when these young people or young men are more or less massacred in the streets, it's always the sob stories. Nothing is ever, how can I say it, proactive, but it's often reactive. Many times these bad moms, you'll hear them say, oh, Tay-Tay was a good kid, or they killed my baby. But we got to ask ourselves the question, where was the father at? And, you know, it takes two to tango. And when we live in a culture where we tend to aggrandize swag over substance many times, this is the aftermath. And it bothers me because we always respond after the fact with tears. But where was the level of collective consciousness that could have come together to help prevent the senseless death as this little 10-year-old boy killed his baby sister? And he's going to suffer now the recompense of not having the proper parents, the proper development and socialization to have more or less prevented senseless violence that appears to be all reoccurring too often in our society, in our community. But as a licensed therapist, that's what we look at. We look at risk factors and protective factors. Having fathers, having intact families, having all those things in place are all healthy safeguards in place to help mitigate behaviors that could be negative to the child, but also negative to the family, and negative also as it relates to recidivism. We're going to continue to look at it, and we're going to continue to talk about the meta madness that's often reoccurring in our communities. Hold tight.
I want justice for Taimani. I want to know why did they do this to my grandbaby. She was a sweet child and enjoyed life, and she would never do anything to hurt anybody.
These are Taimani's relatives on her father's side who live here in Beaufort, where the ribbon marking the girl's freshly dug grave hasn't yet been replaced by a stone. At the time of Taimani's death, her mother, Kayakani Oliver, sat in jail on dozens of drug and felony weapons charges.
And that's what we're talking about. Foolish names, drugs and weapons charges. And this is what's happening. We get these bad parents that breed these babies and bring these lives into the world with crazy, senseless names that don't have any meaning. Taimakana or whatever her name is. And see, guys, this is what we call a faltering community. This microcosm is a greater example of America. This appears to be decaying. But there are pundits that say, come back and save it. And I'll say that you can't save it because many cannot take instruction, and many have so many pathologies going on that if you would try to save it, it would be a work of Herculean effort. I've seen it myself many times as a professional therapist, that many times these levels of dysfunction and pathology goes generations deep, and it would be a waste of your time to invest yourself in such levels of valor only to have the door slammed in your face at the end. Let's continue to look at it. And guys, that's why men are so frustrated with the community and some of the women that are nowhere near the quality of your mothers, your grandmothers, and your great-grandparents. You know, the black community at one point was a very strong community, but even here in the Tar Heel State, you'll begin to see this current melee as we had since the shootings last night as well. Hold tight.
Oliver's mother, who controlled custody, took Taimani and her 2-year-old half-sister Kalia to this home on Agawam Court in Raleigh. It's owned by Shaletta Moore, Kalia's paternal grandmother. So you left, your sister went to work, so they were alone.
We were alone for about an hour.
Anthony Moses admits his sister Shaletta left the girls alone on the night of July 11th, along with 2 other children, the oldest, a 10-year-old boy. Why were the children left alone?
Because she works.
Moses says Moore works 3 jobs to help support her family. Yet within an hour, emergency crews arrived to find Taimani with critical head injuries.
Why would you leave a 10-year-old and little kids in the house with a 2-year-old and a 5-year-old? It should be an adult in the house. You don't leave no kids in the house by themselves.
Taimani's Beaufort family rushed to UNC Hospital in Chapel Hill to find her barely alive.
I would look at my 5-year-old cousin who I seen a week prior to celebrate birthdays. She looked like an alien.
According to the autopsy investigative report obtained by WRAL Investigates, the child was apparently assaulted by the 10-year-old boy, leaving her badly bruised with serious head trauma and a lacerated liver.
They told her she was beat with a belt, and they told her she was beat with a broom.
She was beaten to death like a hate crime.
Clearly, people have work responsibilities, but to leave the children alone like that.
They were true, but they were asleep.
Moses says his family saw no signs the boy could carry out such an act, but believes he may have been jealous of Taimani's birthday attention and sought revenge after she told on him earlier for something he did. The killing only deepens the rift between families of Taimani's mother and her father, Taekwon.
That's why I take a 3-hour drive to them people that she not kin to. If she would have been with us, it never would have happened.
They also blame social services for allowing Taimani to be put in a dangerous situation. Do you feel like the system...
And this is, once again, guys, the inequities that often happen with allowing fathers to take care of their kids. All too often, because of court disparities, because of the family court system, there's a level of bias that's associated with giving men access to their kids. But we see or live in a world where people say, save your community. But the laws are not applicable to saving a community when we have children that are in the hands of ignorant, incompetent mothers. And this is the aftermath that we continue to see not only in our communities, but also in the media. But we say save your community, but we're not looking at the greater picture, and we're not looking at the inequities that continue to permeate that said community. Imagine this man could have got or had access to his daughter. One could argue, why wasn't he in the home protecting his daughter? But many times where illiteracy and the lack of resources and the lack of tenacity that could occur, all too often is not occurring because we don't have the communal bonds that we had in the past that could have eradicated such behavior that we're seeing now. You know, I've heard so many content creators say, just let it burn down. And BJS was talking about the pathologies that go on in the ghetto many times. And even though they weren't living in the ghettos, many ghettos in the inner cities and sometimes the hilltops in Appalachian, you continue to see this level or high level of senseless abuse. We're going to finish looking at it, and then we're going to end the show. But guys, I do this to talk about the meta madness because, as I said earlier, what were they thinking about when they allowed their child to be in that circumstance or situation? And the lack of metacognition is what's causing this kind of behavior now. So hold tight, finish listening, we're going to end it.
System failed Taimani.
Yes.
Is there a lot of pressure?
As both sides wait for answers, Taimani's father's family wants adults to pay.
If a 10-year-old beat this child to death, then an adult needs to be held responsible for that 10-year-old's action.
So Taimani's family on the father's side tell me they are somewhat relieved that 2 people are now charged. Now, in our conversation weeks before his arrest, Anthony Moses said he didn't feel responsibility for what happened. Charlotta Moore, by the way, remains in jail on $35,000 bond. Gerald.
Cullen, there are no words. This story just breaks your heart.
Indeed.
Thank you.
And that's the meta madness. What were they thinking about? What was the uncle thinking about? What was the mother thinking about to leave the baby in the house with a 10-year-old? And what was the father thinking about to get with a woman that has not, or more or less not shown herself to be worthy or adequate of being a healthy mother? This generational trauma, these generational legacy burdens are the things that's keeping us from being great again as we were in the past, where faith, family, and community were the bonds that kept us mentally sane and sound. This has been another episode of Meta Madness, as I am the kosher clinician. And I need you guys to remember this as I am in the greatest state of the union. If it ain't 7, it ain't kosher. If it ain't kosher, it ain't right. There are 7 steps that a man must go through in order to become an optimized male, and understanding how the lack of fathers play a role in the evolution of a child is paramount to how you deal with women in modern times and how you have discipline over your loins, but also have mastery and covering over your seed. Be a protective factor for your child, not a restrictive factor or an unprotected factor. Be well.